For me, the only nick that will be used is on this computer. So probably you being very close here will be here.
But I can change the place.
Look at it.
If it's better, I can change when I finish.
It's okay here. Yes. I expect not off. And then we have to move the computer to the next speaker. So this doesn't work at all. Probably the next speaker should be taking place here.
Mare baterie și putem să-l mutăm. Nu, e plin.
Nu vorbesc mai tare sau ceva acolo. O să rămână pe acel
Ora, col fatto che è in inglese, io mi trovo costretta a seguire un testo, vorrei parlare libera.
Whatever you want. We now switch to English and then we'll see what's going on. Putem să începem acum ceva? Sau? Avem o fallback solution aici, pentru că este filmul care în orice caz va face și va porta ladies and gentlemen, due to some technical mishaps, we start late, and I apologize for that. We start 30 minutes late. I hope anyone can hear me. I'm not so sure about that, but I can still talk. The thing is, whoever is watching us on Zoom should know that the entire colloquium is also recorded independently and will be posted on YouTube shortly, a few days after the colloquium. And we'll send out information with the link to that precise location where you can find us later. Now, we have to start. This morning panel approaches the work of Ioan Culianu from several angles. In fact, several related angles. We have 3 papers, one by Roberta Moretti, the other from Giovanni Casadio, the third by Gabriel Badea. I will skip the long presentations because you can find them on the net and then you can also Google the names and so forth, so to save time. Roberta Moretti, however, I have to say this about her, had started very early with her interest in Culianu. And this goes back to the time when she was a student and she was working under Grazia Marchiano. And thus her first, let's say, important scholarly work was devoted already to Culianu. Then she has translated works like Culianu. She has published books on Culianu, including an important monograph, a synthetic short monograph on Culianu. And I think we are going to hear some reflections under the title, History is not a matter of time, towards a new paradigm for knowledge. Roberta, please. I hope you are closer to the microphone and somebody will hear.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sorin. I thank you all the organization because it's really, really well done. So I will talk about history, and I apologize for my English because it's broken, so it's not so good, but I will read. This is a draft that I started, so it's a new studies that take, from a conference that Culianu held in Arezzo by the title Faust, un mito alle radici dell'Occidente. So it is about history, but it is also about myth. And in this conference, this paper contains a very interesting hint about what is the myth and its definition. And this is a little part that Culianu couldn't develop, of course, but I think it's very important. So I'm trying to start recalling some of the crucial stages in the Culianu's research in history. And there are many stories. As a matter of fact, as an historian, Culianu was very much interested to investigate his study subject. He said that a historian has not only the right, but also the duty to investigate the meaning of history. And he was interested in this subject at least since 1978, when he wrote the monography on Mircea Eliade, when he underlines, following an idea that was of Eliade, that the modern man has an illusion of being a free agent of history. And this illusion involves as well the concept of time. This concept is actually a very general rooted conviction that history is just a sequence of objective chronological events leading to the present situation. This is the way history is commonly conceived, and we must recognize that Culianu had a great ability to undermine common knowledge. Both Culianu and Eliade were aware that this approach to history is extremely reductive because it does not include all the human possibilities, which are both conscious and unconscious creation, which include all the imaginal worlds we are surrounded by, which are historical, but interact with our history or reality. To Culianu, the concept of linear progress of mankind is essentially false. And in the final analysis, he recognizes, I quote, that every cultural system rests on myths, our own as well as that of the Renaissance, not accepting the exact sciences. End quote. After this sentence of Culianu, I'll try to focus on myth, my speech together with this text. He formulated a definition of myth in his late writings about the myth of Faust, where recognized the myth is, I quote, nothing but a hollow narrative pattern which can be filled up at will with the most disparate messages, end quote. Moreover, in the paper written in Italian for a seminar group at the University of Siena in Arezzo, he confirmed this definition, writing as follows, I translate them from Italian: the same history, the same character adapt to ever-changing content. Therefore, it doesn't exist any myth of Faust intended as a significant nucleus, but there is only an empty scheme that fits every message. We can only affirm, he continues, that there is no Faust intended as a stable nuclear meaning, since the meaning is constructed from time to time as a simple vehicle for social messages. End quote. In a similar way, human history is like a flow of changing visions of the universe, which follow one another, completely modifying previous conceptions at the point that even physicists had to recognize that any physical theory is always provisional, given the fact that hypotheses can be contradicted over time. Culianu underlined the fact that this continuous changing involved all science, humanistic and scientific, the so-called soft or hard sciences. He had realized that all these variants do not offer any guarantee of truth, since we are all trapped in a relative, conventional or dualistic vision of reality. Through some of his novels, he tried to exceed the limit of logic in the tentative to overcome the dualistic mind. His interest in mathematical paradoxes, as that of Gödel, for instance, reveals how he was eager to understand the dimension behind any dualistic truth. In system and history, which according to Sorin Antohi represents Culianu epistemological manifesto and also his will, the intellectual shift is remarkable, showing a revolutionary methodology that suggests to observe history's material by taking into account the relativity of space-time, thus from a four-dimensional perspective. Here is interesting combinatory logic finds a precise application in interpreting the phenomenon of history as a product of human minds and understood as a system within which ideas undergo permutation from a simple basic premises, from which multiple systems of thought are generated in variants which expand as fractal ramifications. When we use the concept of system, when Culianu uses the concept of system, he means, I quote, the outcome generated by a simple set of rules that functions as premises. In a certain way, he writes, the system is run in time, yet its time is not the sequential time of our history. End quote. In his short novel entitled The Oremed Late Repentance, published in 1990, he formulates a dicing theory starting from the idea that even if the past appears to us as a block, we nevertheless have the chance to assess it in any sequence or perspective, in such a way that we ourselves are the creators of our past. Now, we would ask on how much does the conceptual overimposition made by our creation of history influence our direct and present perception of reality? Actually, if we meditate on changing phenomena, using, for instance, the ancient Buddhist stages indications, the focus is not on time, but on the impermanence as a character of reality which results very useful to keep in mind into our daily life. So it has also a practical relevance. As far as dualistic thought is concerned, let's briefly remember Culianu's book on the myths of Western dualism, where he had the fundamental intuition or a discovery, as he writes in articles, about the hypothesis of the two creations principle, that of good and that of evil, present in Gnostic myths, which have no history at all, since I quote, Ioan writes, it appears in human mind and then always in the human mind it grows and multiplies over the centuries. It is a system of ideas that, he says, take place in the darkness, like a computer program that has yet to manifest other things on screen. End quote. This distinction between a program and the mind that performs it will make its way into his latest writing, including the essay System and History, where he outlined an explicit methodology to address historical discourse from a cognitive point of view. In the Tree of Gnosis, Culianu is interested in a new approach for observing the heavens and space-time, and it is called morphodynamics. And it has been outlined by Gregory Spinner in his Use and Abuse of Morphology. Culianu was intrigued by the theory of forms, referring to Goethe, who coined the term morphology, which is the theory of form, formation, and transformation of organic nature. As Spinner points out, Culianu was seeking a model which could account for changes over time, showing a particular interest in the great research on the type, the urpa plant, the single plant from which all other plants may be derived. In the tree of Gnosis, he refers also to the biomathematician and polymath Darcy Wentworth Thompson and his book on growth and form, 1917, whose appropriation of morphodynamics, as Skinner points out, heralded, I quote, grand ambition for reinventing the discipline of history, end quote. It is interesting to note that Darcy Thompson, to Darcy Thompson, morphology is only part of a larger science of form that studies all imaginable forms. In out of this work, we find another extremely interesting concept, that is that of interdependence between outer and inner world. It emerges from Culianu's investigation on how the various altered state of consciousness could modify the perception of reality. He also reflects on how being with completely different sensory faculties from ours, such as, for example, a flyer or a snake or a dolphin, perceive their world in a totally different manner, even though they share the same space as us. This means that our world is a construction of our perception. So, can we still say that it is objective? Culianu suggests that what we call an objective universe is instead a conventional reality, created by relative mechanism of perception. Another crucial issue he raises is that there may not be any boundaries between our outside and inside world. In Culianu's words, I quote, they are not truly parallel, for not only do they interfere with each other in many ways, but we cannot even be sure where one of them ceases to be and the other commences. So there are no boundaries between inside and outside world dimensions, according to this Culianu. So the idea that we are separated would be another mental construction. There wouldn't be no separation between subject and object. And the separation would be just another illusion of our dualistic mind, a mental construction which is, however, necessary in order to live our ordinary dimension at the conventional level. Still, on another level, the reality may be non-separate at all. Realizing the way the reality is in its ultimate state, overcoming the illusion projected by the conventional mind, and experiencing the no-limited consciousness, which means a unification of mind with the wholeness of the universe. This is not a matter of knowledge, but it brings that profound wisdom that characterized the great sages in the West as well in the East. Now, I'd like to adopt a comparative perspective to examining some points of contact with the Eastern thought, and particularly with the Indo-Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, in which I'm more familiar with. Culianu's speculation on dualistic thought play a fundamental role throughout his studies, and this is also at the center of the Buddhist philosophy when addressed to the conventional modality of the mind in its interaction with the external world. And it represents a cornerstone in the doctrine of the true truth, the conventional and the infinite. I try not to be too complicated, but we are now entering in a kind of reasoning into reality, epistemologically speaking. You may ask, why this now? Because it has been very much surprising for me to realize that Culianu reached a point that is really interesting, in particular in his recognition of use as an empty narrative scheme, which implies that thanks to this emptiness, infinite forms of thought can arise. As a matter of fact, in the emptiness, all analytical construction fails, ceases to exist. Interdependence, emptiness, and dualism are key concepts in Buddhism, and emptiness in particular. It is its peculiar founding feature. And we are talking about one of the most profound and important philosophies of human thought. It is not possible to deepen here this question, but I wanted to underline the fact that Culianu, in my opinion, has reached an apex of thought, which unfortunately it couldn't develop. And it did so in a path that from the west could have even reached the east, somehow returning to his youthful interest in Eastern philosophy. Let's recall that in Buddhism, emptiness is a pivotal concept, and it is taught by Sakyamuni Buddha at the Vulture Peak in the Rajagriha mountain, Vulture Peak mountain, and represent the popular sutra in Mahayana Buddhism known in Sanskrit as Prajna Paramita Daya, that is translated as the heart of the perfection of wisdom. The sutra famously states, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. And proceed the same that, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness. It is a condensed exposé on the Buddhist Mahayana teaching of the two-truth doctrine, which says that ultimately all phenomena are emptiness, in Sanskrit shunyata, empty of inherent nature, since they are dependently originated. I feel that something similar resonates in Goethe's research for the Ur plants, or primordial plants, which, as he writes in a letter to Hector, must be the strangest creature in the world. Nature itself will be jealous of it. With such a model, it will be possible to invent plants indefinitely. They will be strictly logical plants, that is, even if they may not actually exist, they may exist. They would not be simple shadows of picturesque or poetic dreams, but they would possess an inner truth and necessity. And the same law will be applicable to everything that is alive. The word prajna paramita combines the Sanskrit word prajna, which is wisdom, with paramita, which is perfection. In Buddhism, the ultimate reality that is empty of inherent existence, it is not only a theory, it involves a practice, since its understanding requires most of all its direct realization, which involves the experience of it. And this is an indispensable element of the bodhisattva. Through the analysis of myth, Culianu has identified the object of negation and has found that it is an empty narrative scheme from which all variants are generated in a morphodynamic way, that is, the infinite transformation of force. By accepting this assumption of non-objectivity, narration has the power to forge a reality and not just describe it. From this may derive a vision of the myth that goes beyond objectivistic and dualistic thought. Knowing the myth offers the key to implementing a transformative alchemy that can change not only the state of consciousness, but even the physical principle of existence. It is like a magic that shapes matter, as it operates in a magical transmutation of the forms of culture, social, and ethic, as it also offers a moralistic vision of events. Culianu ends his Italian paper saying that, I quote, "The only possible conclusion is that one must not believe in the myth in any way. We just have to make an almost mythical effort to free ourselves from every myth." End quote. And by extension, I would say, free ourselves of all the conditioning of the conventional reality. And that concludes saying that this is not so easy as reading a book.
Thank you very much, Roberta. I would like to first of all signal the last part of the paper as a very interesting suggestion for further research. That is bringing Culianu closer to a discussion of Oriental forms of thought, starting with Buddhism, but expanding it out. This is really, I would say, a promising field of work. I hope Roberta and others will continue to say. Now I want to place the paper on Dr. Faustus in its context. The context it goes as follows. Upon working by some kind of accidental fate on a project that was devoted to Iași in the early 1980s by the German anthropologist Petru, Culianu discovered the thoughts, quite provocative and in many ways, how shall I say, indomitable, wild, undomesticated, which is the thought of Paul Feyerabend. He, since Hans Peter Dürr himself was a kind of, was a narrativist in anthropology and was looking in every direction to find inspiration and ideas. Normally, he was under the influence of Paul Feyerabend from Feyerabend's moment of, let's say, apex of his career, which was his book of 1975, Against Method. In that book, which I can sum up here, basically, Feyerabend says that anything goes, that from whichever way or point you start, in any direction, you can go freely, because in fact anything goes. And he was referring to theories of science. Feyerabend was talking about physics, very serious sciences, which from the outside seem to be more or less firmly established in some kind of paradigmatic model that goes, of course, Feyerabend himself radicalizes. There is a thesis that dates back from the late 19th century around Vienna and then move on with Germany, and all these discussions in physics are widely known. Feyerabend goes further and in fact proposes an expansion from theoretical physics and from mathematics to astronomy towards the other field of research. And this is an idea that Culianu obviously and he borrowed and he developed. And he developed in the field that, with which he was most familiar. And my second point is that is the result. Now, working on the myth of Faust as a kind of epitome of European civilization, c'è un mito centrale dell'Occidente, in a short Italian article, we have the, let's say, the essence of this. But in this very interesting text, Dr. Faustus, great sodomites and necromanciers, which I had the privilege of translating into Romanian in 1986, and we could only publish it in 1987 because censors were busy elsewhere and they simply skipped this. I developed also in an article on Iliad published in Equinox at around that time, in 1986, 87, in which I expand to Iliad's vision of thought. What? This Feyerabendian vision of myth as an entity, as a hollow structure, which was totally bizarre. But if you take it seriously, then it opens up a world of possibilities. This is about the time, let's say, the mid 1980s, where Culianu's understanding of these things was complete. Then he goes on and applies these visions to different stages and various places. But I'll tell you now, my final point is this. Why is it that Culianu had to resort to this type of extreme, some people call it Rabelaisian conclave, like in the monastery of Hélène, when said that love and do whatever you want, or what you will. Love and do what you will. That is anything else. There is a proviso, no, love and do whatever you want. It's not, doesn't go without the first point. And he does this. That is looking into theory of science, philosophy of science, in the footpath of being inspired by the fact that such ideas can be applied to the humanities. And this is how, when this is the contact with the earth, he becomes even more courageous and starts looking into everything else from all these new theoretical visions of reality, thought about the way mind functions. And this is how we went and got into discussion about fractals. He got it wrong, of course, absolutely wrong. He demonstrated this several times. Picking up the Mandeville's theory of fractals and applying it to me. What? I checked it with Mandeville himself, and he thought I was right. That he was looking into mathematics of all sorts and things like that, looking for an alternative way to traditional topics in cultural history, in history of that, and this is exactly my last point. Why was that? Because theory of history and philosophy of history at the time, which normally would have been the background for any historic, well, any debate about history, was in crisis. The grand narratives of historical theory had been taken down, reconstructed. There was no end in sight for any kind of, all philosophies of history have been discarded, sometimes spectacularly, sometimes less. So the field was empty. in analytic philosophy, there were some attempts to do some kind of new visions of this. If one reads, which I did by some absolute mistake, in parallel, due to my interest in the philosophy of history, the debates in most important journals in the theory of history, and the most important is, of course, history of theory. One can see this negotiation between what the analytical philosophers call continental philosophy, that is, whatever you thought philosophy was, right? And their approach to this. And you see this undecided decade, which is the 1980s, in which discussions go back and forth. So this was not the moment, I can put it this way, for Culianu to find inspiration there. In literary history, it was even worse. And in other forms of, let's say, historical approaches to a certain discipline or a certain object. This was true of the history of religion as a field in general. So he had to resort to something else. And this is how he went all the way to cognitive studies, to all this. And in this process, he was in fact rewriting the bottom line of history of religion itself. So this is how I would place this, you know, sometimes enigmatic, sometimes disconcerting, sometimes, but always I would find inspirational and rich and showing the way ahead to something else. So the point that I make frequently is that even when he was getting it all wrong, which happened then, from the point of view of erudition, which Giovanni Casadio, of course, last said this, because from within the field, there has been so much criticism, level that, directed against Culianu, then and now. Because most of his critics, in their pedantic, scrupulous, serious, traditional way, were trying to find in Culianu's approach to various objects of study, processes and whatever, relations, whatever they knew from the traditions of the field. But they were all wrong themselves because he was looking elsewhere. And that action of looking elsewhere, in fact, everywhere, for answers to questions that were both traditional or endemic or structural, systemic in the field, let's say, history of religion. The fact that he was looking elsewhere signals a crisis within the field itself. Not just a rebelliousness of somebody who comes from the code, Culianu, the Romanian, who suddenly finds that everything is missing or it's, not satisfactory. Because after all, he had the other religion, he could be happy with that. As he was a disciple of the other, was the protege of it. Why is it that he didn't, pursue this, let's say, more traditional? We know that he had all it takes to do this kind of rigorous, pedantic, historical, theological kind of science. He could do this. We know this. The books are there on the table. But by the time he's starting this move, he had closed that part of his life. He had published in 1984 these major books that we know about. And he was free to roam, to look around, to be more rebellious. He had, how should I say, if the boxes, yeah, we can do this, we got that, we got recognition, academic, and so on. And he was free. And this is when he starts, from my viewpoint, as a historian of ideas, the moment when he is becoming interesting. And I would say very interesting. And perhaps, actually, maybe even mandatory for somebody who wants to reconsider all these issues and wants to, with a phrase that I hate, but it's ubiquitous, think outside of the box. This is usually used by people in absolutely vulgar, modest, untheoretical context, but I will use it in this theoretical. Yeah, he was trying to simply move, but only think outside. Move outside the books altogether and take the problems and the questions with him, looking for others. So that would be my comment and my, let's say, contextualization of this. And yes, I hope there would be more in this situation. Now, we go now to Giovanni Casadio, who not only was the chief propaganda officer of the minister, I should say, of this colloquium, because I know that he has popularized it on absolutely every possible professional effort in the world. No, there is no stone unturned. Everybody knows in the world that there is such a discussion.
I can say that.
Now, the title is Ioan Petru Culianu, from the historical comparative method to the games of the mind. Now, I have to warn you, Professor Casadio is scrupulous, pedantic, comes from the very, very highly disciplined field of history of religions, and thus he is very prudent. He never, the title, I shortened it to this form because his title was a lot more modest. He was just proposing a reading of a few letters from back then, exchanged with
That's what I'm going to do.
with Culianu. This is what he's going to do. But I want to warn you, when you listen to him, be aware that he is talking about something much bigger. But again, the pedantic, scrupulous, historical, theological, religious, historical schule, and all these things do not allow him to speak freely. But he is rebellious, and I'm sure.
No. Pay attention to that. Ioan Petru never renounced to the is a pedantic historical philological approach. Never.
Exactly.
He tried to combine both. If you read, especially if you read the reviews, not only the famous introduction to the Guide degli Ade and the Incognitive Essays, we see that he never changed that. Even just justifying that, right? Even criticized, but that was before. He criticized Bruce Lincoln's, recognized that he was stronger philological, but he was able to criticize. Not many people have read these reviews in history of religions, which is very easily available. He criticized Bruce Lincoln on a philological perspective, in a philological. Okay, my full title. Oh, the full title of my presentation is a bit tricky. Ioan Petru Culianu, from the historical comparative method to the mind games on the background of the correspondence 1979-1990 with an Italian peer of age, not of intelligence. So now I have to read, because I know that nobody reads the abstracts, nobody. We are coming to the conference without reading before what our convener sent to us. An attempt to reconstruct these aspects of the academic career and intellectual and emotional development of Ioan Petru Culianu through the unpublished letters, unpublished. Only Livio Bordas has copies of these, and he has been told, please don't publish them because the destinatary is still alive. I mean, I hope so. Addressed to the present writer, letters studied and interpreted on the background and the intertwining with other more relevant correspondences, those with the two mentors, Mircea Eliade and Ugo Bianchi, mostly unpublished. Bianchi letters, only 30% has been published in Archeos by Daniela Dumbrava, with the biographer of Eliade, MacLean Scott Ricketts, mentioned even Romanato, but is available, but of course Romanato is always in the background. That is Culianu to Romanato. and with other minor correspondence. In the conclusion, we try Lanternari, for example, or Momigliano, not so minor, super big scholars, but there are not so many letters. In the conclusion, we try to assess Culianu's contribution to the historical and scientific. This pair was some innuendo, because recently in the field, theory and method, there's been a long discussion about the usage of this couple, historic and scientific, which means that history is not scientific. But anyway, it depends, historic and scientific. There was a strong debate. Myself, I intervened about that. And so for him, it was important to be both historic and scientific. The study of religions in close connection with this human root. So, I've written on my friend and colleague, Ioan Petru Culianu, more than on any figure in the study of religion, except perhaps our common mentor, Ugo Bianchi, or perhaps even Mirceliade. I was not doing a check all the words, but more Culianu, perhaps in sense of quantity. First, a profile which we present in his life, over fortunes and misfortunes, which appear in 4 languages. It was not my merit, just listening. In 4 languages: Italian, English, French, and Romanian. They are almost all different versions. So the problem is my kleine Schrift still. Perhaps I will prepare that. I don't know what part, perhaps the French one, with slight differences. Then analysis of 2 works, Religione e Potere and Io Cari Serio. Finally, a reconsideration of his intellectual route, an essay of 35 pages, which was presented during the Milano conference. There was Daniela Dumbrava in honor of Ugo Bianchi and Ioan Petru Culianu, Maria Vittoria Cerutti, and other people. She was a convener. The intellectual route form a traditional historical comparative approach in Petathonian and Eliadean style to a cognitive science of religion perspective from a very particular angle. That is my reconsideration at the time, 8 years ago, from a very particular angle based on his conviction that religion can be described as a game of mind in the style of Lullian as combinatoria. I just mentioned, it's important for me because I read it recently. Moshe Idel in Journal of the Study of Religion and Ideologies really wrote on this issue. Sometimes the footnotes are more important than the text himself. Therefore, when asked by Sorin and Antohi to contribute some new reflections, 30 years after Culianu's parinirvana, most people know I use this word, parinirvana, was Culianian word, apropos Mirceliade, I had some hesitations with it. And then I conceived the idea to adopt a life writing, it's a critical denomination, life writing critical creative practice. Me too, I like to joke. To play, which is both semantically. To play in several languages means both to joke and to play an active role in the theater. Critical creative practices, practice based rather than on. Of course, we have taken account even these approaches on a post-feministary, especially post-feministary. I use this approach of life writing in the style of Marlene Cadare. She's a Canadian scholar. No, but I liked, I think, too, that method is it's a way, I don't know who wrote that. The method in inventory is what after you have done your root, because method comes from Greek odos, which means root, and then it appears. You're not just have a method before. It's
le chemin après l'avoir parcouru.
Mais qui l'a écrit ça? J'ai oublié. C'est les livres sombres, j'ai oublié. Oui, extrêmement. Je l'aime beaucoup, hein. on my own material and mental archives. So, after more than 30 years, during which they had lived, the letters, in the drawer of my Roman home, I picked up and reread, not without emotion, the 8 letters that Ioan had sent to me, only 8, but for me are precious, to me during the 11 years, I like numbers, 11 years of our association. Don't like they used the word friendship or others, association. This reading and copying, I had to copy them. There were, except one, all manuscript, pen written. Copying induced a sort of anamnesis. I'm a scholar of Plato, so I like this word, anamnesis, in me, with the consequent reminiscence. So I decided to proceed to a clarification of all the circumstances, intellectual and material, related to his statements, impressions, and exhortations, helping me in this with the reading or rereading of those works, his or even mine contemporary, he was referring to. This is explained, of course, in the footnotes. Of course, evidently I had no time to read and no intention. The approach I have adopted can be defined as perspectivism, and correspond to the 3 perspectives that Sorin Antohi outlined in a recent review, which appeared in Observatoire Cultural, of the relationship, is a famous introduction to preface of the 4th edition of Mir's Eliade in the Polyrom series, of the relationship between Eliade and Culianu, a topic not infrequently addressed both in letters and in our conversations during the approximately 10 meetings, faccia a faccia, face to face, that we had. I think that here in this room, I'll be only one person to have seen and touched Ioan Petru. Yeah, because Grazia Marcanov is not here. Grazia Marcanov is much more than me, but in a different perspective. And so, but she's not here, unfortunately, really, because for me, Grazia, I went to Culianu again, thanks to Grazia and Elemire, which is my approach before, it was quite different, more skeptic. A topic, allora, perspective 1, the most recurrent in the letters, is scholarly and cultural. Try to make an exegesis of your own positions. Perspective 2 is personal, related to temperament and emotions. Perspective 3 is ideological and political. Of course, they are not separated, but we can try to make this kind of disposition. In fact, given our equality of age and common discipleship, remarkably, our sharing almost every time, not all the time, a common vision of the world, political, ideological, and something else, not all. Almost a picture of bio e parallelo, proud, Plutarch, bio e parallelo of Giovan, Pietro, and Giovanni, as Grazia Marcanov likes to say, emerges out of this critical sounding. In the epistemological reflection of contemporary historiography, perspectivism, coming from German, perspectivism, not to be confused with multi-perspectivism, which is some theological basis, origins, and even in implications. It's better, multi-perspectives, is considered as the guiding principle that perception and knowledge of something are always bound to the interpretive, you see there's kind of relativism here, the interpretive perspectives of those observing it. In this specific case, the perspective of the Romanian Ioan in the Italian Giovanni, in most, so not all cases, coincident, as I said before. It must be stressed to avoid misinterpretations that perspectivism is not equal to relativism. In the sense, especially relativism, not Franz Boas, but as it is used by our colleagues, so-called postmodernist interpreters of history, in the sense of a rejection, a total rejection of objectivity, Nietzsche, Foucault, as in start and postmodern stances, while not ignoring some well-known formulation by our friend Friedrich Nietzsche comes out. In the Genealogy of Morals, 1887, we think that, so modestia aparte, I'm nobody. We think then that an historian must proceed in a more empirical and commonsensical way in the wake of Michel Montaigne, who in his essay, first book, chapter 7, very famous one, De Cannibal, written 1995, observed, I've here the English translation, not the French origin, I have to find them. Men of intelligence, all men of intelligence, starting with Culianu, notice more things and views, then no, it's a verb, and view them, consider them more carefully, but they interpret them. So Montaigne is a precursor of relativism. And to establish and substantiate their interpretation, they cannot refrain from altering the facts a lot. Me too, I alter the facts, of course. In my memory, I'm cultivating that. I'm not ingenious. They never present things just as they are, if they exist as stances, as they are, but twist and disguise them to conform to the point of view from which they've seen them, lived them, and certified in them, and to gain credence for the opinion and make it attractive. This Montaigne. They do not mind adding something. Counterfeit. Counterfeit spirits is the title of the latest essays of our friend Culianu. They do not mind adding something, falsificatori, something of their own, or extending and amplifying. The important is to recognize that. Most of my colleagues to always have the truth. I must honestly recognize that in the explanatory notes, very early, so very long, in this I hope to publish them, in the explanatory notes that added to Culianu's ipsissima verba, I follow this characteristic human tendency, mensig übermensig. I said, no, I confirm things to the point of view from which I've seen them. That's unavoidable. This said, I pray the prospective reader of a future written version of this presentation to give credence to my view, which sounds, I'm not ironic, attractive and convincing. Let us now come to the core of our presentation, giving the floor to Ioan Petru Culianu himself. Now I switch to Italian necessarily, because sources must be read and explained and possibly interpreted basing on the original text, which have already distributed to the public. If somebody has not got the handouts at Sorin, they can come here spontaneously to take the original Italian and I hope well-made Romanian version from these envelopes. The original text, which I have already distributed to the public, both in the, okay, so let's start with some letters. Rigorous chronological sequence. Groningen, Rijksuniversiteit-Instituut voor Romaanse Talen, 1st of November 1979. Carissimo Casadio, ti ringrazio per la lettera e l'estratto. This is a wonderful, it was fascinating. Scusa se ti scrivo a macchina. It's the only letter, ma altrimenti dovresti sciuparti gli occhi con la mia grafia. Nota bene, non ho ancora letto l'estratto, ma lo farò appena avrò sbrigato altri lavori urgenti. L'argomento mi interessa moltissimo, politico. Confesso di aver commesso anch'io, perché in italiano we say commesso un misfatto. It's not so common commesso un articolo, però there is this subtext. Commesso un peccato.
Questa è...
Era un peccato.
Si dice in romeno,
peccati contro la... Ma his Italian is wonderful. There are no mistakes.
I committed this letter, which would be like,
it's a Romanism.
No, of course.
No, anch'io qualche articolo nel proposito, but for us Italian is suggestive, di cui purtroppo non ho estratti da mandarti, me ne restano 2 per ogni evenienza, ma puoi trovare il neofilologo Ioan 1979 in biblioteca, nonché forse a Bologna la fantomatica rivista di Gianni Scalia, long thought not explain who is Gianni Scalia, l'arma propria, che io non ho nemmeno visto, infatti il suo articolo non è mai apparso, e che temo, qui salta fuori la politica, un po' troppo orientata a sinistra, anzi una sinistra peculiare, la nuova sinistra, la nouvelle gauche, per i miei gusti. Io vi ho collaborato perché in principio il mio lavoro non esce dall'ambito propriamente scientifico. Punto. Cercherò il libro del Pellicani. E qui è il libro di Luciano Pellicani, perché io non avevo mandato un off-print mio, avevo mandato la fotocopia di una recensione del libro del grande politologo, filosofo, sociologo e giornalista Luciano Pellicani, che mi interessava molto e che infatti anch'io avevo scoperto per caso. Forse la prossima volta che, essendo italiano, diciamo proprio, Coborind, in Italia, intanto lui veniva in macchina da Groningen a Milano abbastanza spesso, dopo che aveva comprato questa macchina molto, ci teneva, aveva avuto problemi a fare l'esame della patente, ma dopo 4 anni che si è sposato con Zoe Carmen aveva anche acquistato una macchina, usava sempre la macchina per venire a Milano. Un mio articolo più interessante dei primi 2 deve uscire sulla Romanistische Zeitschrift für Literaturgeschichte di Heidelberg. È un articolo che riguarda Eminesco, è uno dei 5 articoli, tutti con dei titoli molto allusivi, che riguardano Eminesco. Lui è arrivato, come tutti i romeni, vabbè, l'ha letto alla scuola elementare Eminesco, ma Eminesco sicuramente è una delle sue guide spirituali dal punto di vista poi della critica, non che lui fosse emineschiano, insieme a degli altri. Eminesco è sicuramente uno degli autori su cui ha scritto di più. Mi sembra 5 articoli, sono tutti pubblicati nei 2 volumi di studi romanisti di Poliroma, sia l'originale italiano-francese di questi. Con questi saggi e altri avrei voluto fare un volumetto, ma finora non ho trovato un editore. Vabbè, qui c'è molta erudizione, è una specie di catalogo bibliografico questa prima lettera, gli altri cambiano perché lui non aveva tempo dopo. E anche poi insomma mi interessa moltissimo la tua tesi e devo dire che quando io lessi questa cosa, che la tesi non l'avevo neanche finita, per me fu una specie di adrenalina, Mi interessa moltissimo la tua tesi. Spero che tu la finisca presto e la pubblichi da qualche parte. Io la finì 2 anni dopo e mezzo. Mi laureai nel 1981, qui siamo nel febbraio ma che febbraio? Nel marzo del 79. Ok, 2 anni e mezzo prima. Qui arriva la famosa battuta. Aspetto una coppia. Credo che dare pacche sulle spalle. Allora, pacca sulle spalle, non ti do da... È questo, dare pacche sulle spalle. Come si dice in francese, rumeno, non so. Dare le pacche sulle spalle. Credo che sia un gesto comune, significa molta confidenza. Che ha dare pacche sulle spalle. Dare pacche sulle spalle a Turcan. Allora, Roberto Turcan, noi ci eravamo incontrati a conferenze sulla soteriologia, che aveva avuto luogo a Roma. Roberto Turcan era il numero 1, il top vero, di tutti gli studiosi di Dioniso, eccetera, eccetera. Come io spiegherò in queste lunghissime note, all'epoca io ero molto spacciato, shameless, davo pacche sulle spalle a Turcan e intervenivo con lui perché Turcan per me, poi dopo è diventato uno dei miei menti spirituali e abbiamo avuto anche un carteggio, l'ho visitato a Capone in Francia e poi ho pubblicato nel festival in suo onore. E quindi è stato un po' profetico. Infatti dice, sia una bellissima cosa, ironico, ma questo non si può fare sempre, infatti, e sistematicamente, per quanto sia simpatico. Probabilmente questa cosa l'ha letta, io l'andai a far vedere a un comune amico, il famoso, che immediatamente poi andò a dirlo a Bianchi, che mi disse, ma come si permette Casadio di dare pacche sulle spalle? Ma naturalmente Bianchi era bonario al professor Turcan. Tutti ricordi che mi sono venuti alla mente dopo 30 anni, o di più di 30 anni. Ad ogni modo ho fiducia che un giorno gliele darai a parità di lavori. Roberto Turcan, accademico di Francia. Se hai tempo, guarda il primo fascicolo di Evum, recensione di Prometto di Bianchi, è sempre catalogo bibliografico. Poi c'era il famoso articolo su Kairos, Erstellen un Mythos in der Litterperle. Il famoso articolo, a questo punto io sono andato poi a cercare e ho scoperto delle cose che sono interessanti anche per il mistero, insomma, dei rapporti di questi big men. Il signor Werblowski, grande studioso, che ho conosciuto molto bene, sia a Erano sia in Sicilia, sia a Tokyo 3 anni prima che morisse. Il signor Werblowski era diventato da pochissimi direttore di Numen. Grazie a Bianchi, Culianu aveva pubblicato in Numen un articolo, la Femme Celeste, e il direttore era Ma Van Vos, che è uno studioso olandese, un egittologo, ma non particolarmente temperamentale. Quando sul tavolo di Werblowski arriva il secondo articolo, che era la presentazione che aveva fatto al congresso importantissimo di Lancaster nel 1975, doveva andare con Bianchi, c'era anche laureato nel 75, prova a farlo su numero, ma è successa a me la stessa cosa e anch'io sono stato rifiutato da Kippenberg con una lettera veramente che l'avrei strangolato. Werblowski si accorse che Culianu aveva fatto dei peccati, aveva fatto delle cose, non lesse neanche l'articolo. Sa cosa che nel suo bios c'erano delle cose che per lui personalmente, perché era ebreo, era molto aperto, anche progressista, non era sionista, e quindi rifiutò l'articolo senza neanche leggerlo e finì. C'erano delle cose che non piacevano, che sembravano antisemita in questo articolo, non nella vita di Culianu, e fu accettato invece da Schubert, che era professore di Judaistic all'Università di Vienna, nella rivista Kairos, che era una rivista molto importante, però dovette tradurre in tedesco, perché Kairos pubblicava solo in tedesco. Se hai tempo, vabbè, lasciamo perdere qui, ti ringrazio molto ancora una volta per la pena che ti sei data di procurarmi quelle fotocopie. Spero di incontrarti l'anno prossimo a Lovagno, mi scrive Luven Lovagno, se ci sono. Invece lui ci fu, io no, perché Bianchi non mi dette il permesso. Fu l'anno successivo, nel 1980, ecco, quella famosa foto, ecco vi dico, a Lovagno, qui, dove c'è Culianu in quella foto, se qualcuno la vuole, lui andò, eccolo, se le vuoi distribuire, Questo è l'evento di Rovagno, infatti si potrebbe negli atti pubblicare anche la foto. Spero anche di sentire una tua relazione, siamo per. È molto, leggo la seconda e poi finiamo. Cosa che mi piacerebbe non poco, mi piace molto questo suo understatement, non poco, non dice molto, non poco è più di molto.
Romanismo anche
sì, ma l'italiano è perfetto,
sì,
non è lo dite anche voi romeni, ma
lo so.
però a me non poco piace moltissimo.
No.
Ciao romanesi, ciao e grazie ancora. La seconda lettera fu dell'83, 2 anni dopo. Caro Casadio, ti sono molto grato per l'estratto mio, molto erudito che mi hai mandato. Nel frattempo ci eravamo incontrati naturalmente una volta nel 1981 e mi aveva dato, prima persona che incontro per strada, iter in siliis. Lo ritengo per il prossimo post-scriptum, ecco, quelli che gli aveva pubblicato Eliade, lì per post-scriptum centrale, lì c'era un altro che si chiamava Jonathan Smith. Tutte le volte che arrivava, questo è nel carteggio con Eliade, un articolo di John Smith faceva pollice verso, e quindi in tutta la sua vita, con grande compiacimento del mio amico, non suo amico, Cristiano Grottanelli, lui non pubblicò mai articoli. Dopo sarebbe diventato direttore di History Religion col permesso di Randy Doning, che contava molto più di Jonathan Smith, però morì senza aver pubblicato un articolo. Ma c'era molte recensioni. Questa non è una recensione, questa era proprio una panoramica, un review di tutto quello che era stato scritto in Italia di storia delle religioni. Ecco, io purtroppo non ho ancora scritto, non ci sono elencate tutte le cose, il che dette origine poi a polemiche terribili, se io raccontassi tutto quello, perché definì Dario Sabattucci, che allora è il secondo boss dopo Bianchi, politico della religione, non storico. Naturalmente per lui deve essere un complimento, ma Sabattucci l'ha presa molto male, lo vuole distruggere. Qualche piccola osservazione da dilettare, ecco qui pretende che io citi Willem Koppes, io ho citato Willem Koppes in Verbita, dovevo citare Richard Weizenstein e Wilhelm Schmidt. Ecco, allora qui dimostro nelle note che lui faceva cilecca, nel senso che queste cose le considero un pochino più io. Wilhelm Schmidt, il padre Wilhelm Schmidt, quello dell'umonoteismo, qui con la nozione teoria dei misteri c'entra poco o nulla. E Richard Weizenstein che è una sua ossessione, insieme a Willem Busset e a Io Vinegre, una sua ossessione nella sua battaglia contro la Legacies le scientifiche Schule, non è stato un grande teorico dei misteri. Ok, aspetto quindi con impazienza il seguito del tuo studio concernente probabilmente le istituzioni misteri. Così fu. Dove arriva il tuo... vabbè, qui parla della mia tesi, si domanda se arriva fino all'aspetto antico. E infatti quando la tesi fu pubblicata molti anni dopo, nel 1994, c'era appunto citazioni del Dioniso nel Tardo Antico. Mi dispiace di essere ora a corto di estratti, per cui non ti posso inviare altro che 2 note apparse su History of Religions. A questo punto poi leggo l'ultima, perché forse è quella più importante. Avrei voluto spedirti un articolo uscito sulla rivista di storia e letteratura religiosa, quel famoso articolo in francese su Giordano Bruno, sulla magia e tutto il resto, che poi dopo è quello da cui nasce Io Cari Serio. Infatti nel 1981 Io Cari Serio, il manoscritto è datato 1981, prima che lui cominci a lavorare per Flammarion, invece Eros e Masi, aveva quell'altro perché lui capì che l'editoria francese quello non avrebbe fatto. Allora rifece tutto a bordo. Si sa che i 2 libri sono analoghi ma non sono affatto coincidenti. Lo tiene nel cassetto e dobbiamo dire grazie a Cornelio Cicortas e altri che hanno pubblicato Io Cari Serio, per me è stata una rivelazione. Ma non ne ho più estratto. Pensavo che si potesse interessare, ecco, la continuazione uscirà in Studi Materiali Storia dei Giorni, sempre in francese. Bianchi li pubblicò in Studi Materiali La Magie di Giordano Bruno, che poi sarà sviluppato nel volume che abbiamo citato. Il professor Bianchi non mi ha detto nulla di Pettazzoni. Vabbè, qui c'è una cosa molto peculiare nelle modalità accademiche. Bianchi, un po' s'offese, non li invitò alla conferenza per l'anniversario della nascita di Pettazzoni. che preferì imitare Grottanelli, i due, io faccio anche un gioco di parole, preferì la scuola di Roma, Grottanelli, che rappresentava una certa potenza della scuola di Roma, l'arrivo di Brelitz, ed era materialista, eccetera, eccetera, frequentava molto Eliade, ma così per opportunità. Lui si è molto rivista cristiana, e quindi non poteva imitare Culianu, i due si detestavano, anche se non se lo dicevano. Aveva un approccio piuttosto diverso. Ti lascio con i più cari saluti, ringraziando per le vie dell'estratto che mi ha fatto veramente piacere. Allora, io adesso noto solo la variante in testazione, così come si vede ad esempio con le lettere con Eliade, si parla, compone, eccetera. Diventa nella successiva carissimo Casadio, e nel finale affettuosamente tuo Ioan nell'85. Poi sempre nell'85 divento carissimo Giovanni, e questo naturalmente cambia, è chiaro. Quando invece del cognome si usa il nome e poi si passa all'effettuosità, questa è una lettera molto importante, che però il commento è più lungo del testo, e si chiude con affettuosi saluti e ringraziamenti. Vabbè, si dice anche in romeno, ma è molto italiano, non si dice in romeno, affettuosi saluti e ringraziamenti, vabbè, tuo Giovanni. Poi, ecco, carissimo amico, Sculpur, infatti mi ha tradotto Sculpur, perché non avete l'accrescitivo carissimo, e credo che Sculpur sia più che drag, anche più confidenziale. Carissimo amico diventa nell'87 finale, ecco, questo è proprio romeno, tante cose buone, trovateci le buone. Noi lo diciamo tante cose buone, ma è molto familiare, non è la corrispondenza accademica. Siamo al dicembre del 1987, carissimo amico. Carissimo amico è più che usare il nome. Poi siamo al febbraio dell'88, di nuovo carissimo amico. Poi, e vi leggo l'ultimo. Naturalmente ci saranno anche conclusioni teoriche alla fine, è logico, però prima devo fare la strada, come tu mi hai giustamente chiesto. Ecco, allora adesso l'ultima, qui lui sta scrivendo out of this world, dove devo dirlo, Eliade, contrariamente a quello che sostengono in Romania, compreso Andrea Steano, Eliade è citato una volta, non nel libro su sciamanesimo, ma questo lo devo dire perché su questo famoso issue che l'avrebbe tradito la Isabella Schiavi. Allora, quel libro, note erudite, ce ne sono pochissime, insomma, confessione spirituale. Perché non vorrei essere un libro di erudizione, la famosa prefazione di Larry Sullivan, eccetera, eccetera, il nuovo approccio, e poi pubblicato con Shambhala, quindi un pubblico molto peculiare, non si cagano in schifezze come magia. Non c'era bisogno di dare la biografia sullo sciamanesimo, tutto il mondo sa che gli hanno scritto il libro sullo sciamanesimo. Invece Casadio, che nessuno conosceva, è un intero capitolo, praticamente cita due lavori miei, anzi citazioni proprio ad verbum. Carissimo Casadio, per forza, perché io sapevo fare, anche io ero un po', pare che mi piaceva, che non sono ipocrita, l'avevo citato. Cioè il mio referente teorico per questi miei due lavori era Ioan Petru, non il referente teorico, il referente teorico, che è importante. Anche se devo dire la bibliografia, il 70% delle mie bibliografie, ma anche Bianchi, le prendevo da Culianu. Una volta mi disse Bianchi, senti, ma quel saggio che Culianu cita a pagina tale, ma io non ce l'ho, io l'avevo fotocopiato, era una tesi dottorato tedesca sull'iniziazione. Culianu la conosceva, e io me l'ero procurato in Germania, dico Bianchi, il professore, dico, ma no, e allora prese su il libro, che erano già fotocopie di 300-400 pagine, solo perché l'aveva citato Culianu e la fotocopiò lui stesso. Allora, l'ultima lettera ve la leggo, appunto. Ho letto con grande piacere i tuoi due eccellenti articoli. Sogni, visione, antropologia patristica. E ne ho fatto uno sul sogno, figurarsi se Culianu non si interessava ai sogni, vero? E l'altro era visione e antropologia nella patristica, che era un titolo perché ero costretto a mettere questa cosa, perché erano congressi organizzati da bravi sacerdoti, allora padri della Chiesa, eccetera. Ma parlavo di cose molto profane, anzi di cose un pochino pornografiche, anche se l'Emizola, quando mi ha citato un centro libro, dice che metto il fallo di Gesù Cristo nell'inferno, di un po' una osservazione, che sto citando abbondantemente in un lavoro in inglese che uscirà prossimamente. uscì dopo la sua morte. Sottolineato, sentite congratulazioni, cioè, felicitari, ma sentite. Dal 27 febbraio saremo a Roma, telefono 06881171, a casa appunto, che allora era vivo, del padre di Grazia Marchianò, in via della Buffalotta, mi è venuto in mente, infatti ci andai. Fino al 31 maggio, credo che ci andammo verso il 28 marzo. Speriamo di incontrarci al più presto, e ci incontrammo quell'anno 3 volte. Una volta fu all'Istituto Stenone di Roma, una volta fu a Torino alla Fiera del Libro, dove lui mi fece avere il permesso così, ma non potei dire una parola, io credevo di... semplicemente non pagare il biglietto d'entrata alla Fiera del Libro di Torino. Lui dirigeva, che era un giovane, insomma, di quelle prime armi in Italia, niente meno, più di Filonimo, niente meno che la tavola rotonda sul mito, in cui era invitato uno dei più famosi scrittori del mondo, Jorge Amado, che aveva 80 anni, che naturalmente tutta la sua narrativa è il mito, il famoso mito del nord-est di Badea, e io conobbi lì. Si hanno anche due intellettuali italiani molto famosi che mi sono venuti in mente, sono tutti e due morti, il poeta Conte, non è il omonimo del nostro politico Conte, e un altro critico letterario. Naturalmente la sala era strapiena, io non riuscii neanche a dirgli ciao e tacqui, ma non pagai. E quindi ci vedemmo lì, poi andammo a cari saluti a Noemi, famosa Noemi è nella bibliografia, è stata una delle mie iubite, se la vedi nel frattempo, e altresì al professor Bianchi e a tutti gli amici dei tempi milanesi. Sembra, questo è carino, questo understatement, sembra, carissimo amico, che in Italia ormai io sia abbastanza noto, ci teniamo moltissimo. Riprova questo bel numero di leggere, nonostante le terribili fotografie. Allora, e mi mandò la fotocopia, che c'è di sua mano la data di leggere. Leggere una rivista, insomma, di lettura, attualmente le mie gli aveva procurato questo, e fa un'introduzione in cui dà un bios, che è un pochino il resume, dopo uscì come libro, ma era ancora vivo, e il libro uscì che lui era appena morto, poi dopo è stato ripubblicato da Sorin Antohi, quasi per intero in Religion and Fiction. E allora lì in leggere ci sono le foto terribili di lui, veramente, con la Iubito. Secondo me lei è Hillary, anche se si dice che è una sconosciuta, è lei, è bionda, e c'è la foto dell'Enisolla, vabbè, sono foto piuttosto oscene. Ma questo lo devo dire, è un suo racconto storico alla Dumas. Io ci cascai in pieno. Lui si inventa un eresiologo, un eretico che si chiamava Giovanni di Cappadocia, e io me ne accorsi solo dopo un anno. È un'invenzione totale. Naturalmente sono idee che si trovano nell'epoca. È naturalmente un eretico che gli piaceva molto perché si occupava di giochi della mente, anzi è precursore, si sa, avete letto anche voi quell'articolo. Io ho visto una cosa di Roberta Moretti online, nelle note infatti ti cito, in cui tu
Giovanni,
proprio arrivi alle stesse conclusioni.
Giovanni,
Questo Giovanni, scusa, Giovanni Cappadocia, quindi non ho un minuto. Giovanni Cappadocia, che si chiamava Giovanni, che non esiste, cioè era un vescovo, non c'entrava nulla, è quello che ha inventato la teoria della mente, dei giochi della mente e della matrix universalis, come scrive anche Roberta in questa cosa online. Sono sicuro, e qui è ironico, con la tua, ironico, ma non è ironico, è così, è il suo modo di esprimersi. Sono sicuro che con la tua acuta, assutita intelligenza, la mia intelligenza cade in pieno, dove siccome stavo lavorando su quelle cose, andai a cercare questo testo e non lo trovai, non esisteva. Apprezzerai il brano scritto insieme da Hillary e da me. Carissimi saluti, a presto.
Grazie Giovanni. Giovanni Casadio can never be stopped by anyone.
Beh,
though many people have tried.
Parlare 2 ore.
No, you cannot. You can still try, but you fail. Then I'm saying this for those who will, will see, will see us on the net, that he somehow irresistibly moved back to Italian and kept speaking in Italian. So I hope many of those people out there who can see us will learn Italian in the meantime and will be able to follow. What we have here, if I am allowed to make a short comment, is this exercise in ego history, which we witnessed. Somebody who has been so deeply involved in the world and worlds of scholarly pursuits in which Culianu himself was active, at this pivotal moment in his life, before, let's say, between his first late 1970s important publications and all the way to the his last book, basically Out of This World. On this last book, yes, it is true. It is totally absurd, not only stupid, to say that he is not quoting this and that, because that, again, as Giovanni Casadio mentioned, that was not a scholarly work. In fact, it is a scholarly work without the footnotes. Out of This World is a work of synthesis, first of all, because it covers a variety of traditions that are very important, the most important cultural, spiritual, religious traditions. But he keeps footnotes and comments to a minimum. And I would say that anyone who ever wants to approach that topic, which is a very, very serious and big topic, can, maybe even should, start there. And then move on, starting from the minimal critical apparatus that is included in the book, and move on to the, let's say, scholarly treatment of those topics. But keep in mind the synthetic treatment. So you have a synopsis, a critical synopsis, all thought through of all these traditions in a book. Of course, publishing it with Shambhala was
New Age.
Yeah, that is, as the name indicates, it is a new age, which indicates his interest of hitting a market that was still flourishing, not as flourishing and as in the 1960s, 70s, when Eliade had the good luck of being taken up as a reference by those. Usually,
yes.
yeah, usually by mistake. Of
Yeah,
course,
neo-shamanist.
yeah.
Oh, neo-shamanist.
Shamanism was for yoga. These were books that enjoyed a fantastic popularity in the United States and elsewhere around the world. Turned Eliade from the scholar that he was into a popular writer of almost fictional, you see, variations on spiritual traditions. And I may interject here my conjecture that somehow Culianu was interested in reaching out to all those people out there. I'm not sure, but he may have in mind, may have had in mind, a project in which this synopsis could be developed with all the scholarly footnotes, the historical philological way. And I close my comment on this. I think it is, and thank you, Giovanni, for saying this. Indeed, when you started, indeed, as I mentioned earlier, the historical philological Culianu is always there. So when we talk about the periodization of Culianu's life, we shouldn't think that the previous moments had been deleted, forgotten, renegated.
Absolutely.
No, they are always there. One of the things about evolution, which many people tend to forget, is that it carries with it everything that had happened before. So there is a memory inside, intrinsic, but also visible if you read the text carefully, which indicates that yes, all the previous stages are recapitulated, are always present. So that is, I think, very important. And this is why I would, in fact, exhort readers of Culianu, like, in fact, every other author, to keep this in mind. Yes, there is evolution, there is change.
Yes, I found out the same thing with Lugo Bianchi. Io Wittgenstein. That is the ideas which in the old ages, I know, but they were implicit, almost in the first juvenile writings.
Yes. So this is what,
Yes.
and this is true of Eliade, of all people.
Of course.
We always remember, and the case was made for Eliade, that some of his most important
In
ideas.
Magazine Piazza Filosofale, you can find some. Not Heidegger.
Exactly.
Even Stransky said, I
Exactly.
can't get it out from Heidegger.
Yeah.
From Ionescu.
No.
His emotions when he was a teenager.
So we leave it at that, but I think when this paper is going to be published, you'll see the richness of this ego histoire that then branches back into the context, the scholarly context of the book. We go now to further to Gabriel Badea, who is a researcher at the Institute of Literary History in the Romanian Academy in Bucharest, and who has written mostly on Eliade. And now he's going to talk about Ioan Petru Culianu and his theory of magic.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here, and I would like to thank.
Speak up a bit.
Organizers. I would like to thank to the organizers for the occasion to be here, and especially to the Professor Sorin Antohi for organizing this conference. And this place, this amphitheater resembles very much to Giulio Camilo's Theater of Memory. And this is a topic of Culianu's book, Eros and Magic in the Renaissance. And my paper my presentation is about Ioan Petru Culianu and his theory of magic. I propose to discuss the contribution of Culianu to the theory of magic and to his position in relation to the other theories of this field of research. And I will refer to the works of Fraser, Tyler, Eliade, and Ernesto de Martino. My paper deals mainly with the first Culianu and his most well-known book, Eros and Magic in the Renaissance, from 1984. And I want to reconstruct the context in which it was written and published, as well as the relations with works of a similar topic, due to names such as Francis Yates, Daniel Pickering Walker, Paul Oscar Christeller, and Giorgio Agamben. And I want to refer to the originality of this book and the way in which Culianu related to certain topoi of the Renaissance and the figure of the magician philosopher Marsilio Ficino, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, Giordano Bruno, and Cornelius Agrippa. And other points of interest will be the relations between magic and natural philosophy, the opposition between Neoplatonism and Hermeticism on the one hand, and Aristotelianism on the other. The distinction between spiritual and demonological magic, and finally the relation between Eros and magic. I want to reconstruct the framework of these theories of magic, and I will refer to two important scholars who are very famous, but Culianu quotes very scarcely in his book from 1984, and mainly to Edward Barnett Taylor and his book from 1871, Primitive Culture, and James George Fraser, The Golden Bough from 1890. Both these scholars propose the application of Darwinian scheme in the field of anthropology. And I want to quote from Taylor's book his definition of magic. And I quote, "One of the most pernicious delusions that ever vexed mankind, the belief in magic. It belongs in its main principle to the lowest known stages of civilization and the lower races who have not partaken allegedly of education of the world, still maintaining in vigor." And Taylor does not refer only to this primitive level of magic, and he also develops a mechanism of understanding the occult sciences from other parts of the world. And I quote, "The principal key to the understanding of occult science is to consider it as based on the association of ideas, a faculty which lies at the very foundation of human reason, but in no small degree of human unreason also. Man, as yet in a low intellectual condition, having come to associate in thought those things which he found by experience to be connected in fact, proceeded erroneously to invert this action and to conclude that association in thought must involve similar connection in reality." Taylor does not yet make the connection between magic and science, but James Fraser will do this step, and he and I will quote, "Wherever sympathetic magic occurs in its pure unadulterated form, it assumes that in nature one event follows another necessarily and invariably without the intervention of any spiritual or personal agency. Thus, its fundamental conception is identical with that of modern science. Underlying the whole system is a faith, implicit but real and firm, in the order and uniformity of nature." And in his book, Culianu deals very much with this relation between science and magic. And he develops a theory that is very interesting in his later papers. Now I want to pass to Ernesto De Martino, then I will focus on Culianu's book to outline some important points. Ernesto De Martino has mainly is well known for his critical ethnography. I don't know if what were the relations between Culianu and De Martino. Maybe Professor Casadio knows something more to tell us. De Martino was opposing these theories of Fraser and Taylor. He proposed the interpretation of magic as a cultural effect. He was interested in magic as a cultural phenomenon, having its own justification, we would say its own rationality. And he said that magic is a response that the pre-modern man brings to the so-called crisis of presence or to the negativity of existence. And I will quote from his book, Sud e Magia, l'immensa potenza del negativo lungo tutto l'arco della vita individuale, col suo corteo di traumi, scacchi, frustrazioni e la correlativa angustia e fragilità di quel positivo per eccellenza che è l'azione realisticamente orientata in una società che deve essere fatta dell'uomo e destinata all'uomo, di fronte a una natura che deve essere senza sosta umanata dalla demiurgia della cultura. Ecco, si dirà, la radice della magia lucana come di ogni altra forma di magia. And De Martino postulates the idea of culturally conditioned nature, starting from a premise accepted by many other previous authors, such as Lucien Lévy-Bruhl, Franz Cumont, and others. Unlike modern primitive men, the primitive man does not have the notion of unity of his own personality, constantly living with the anxiety of not losing their soul and not losing their world. I want to pose one question for better understanding why I put in the mirror these authors, Taylor and Fraser and De Martino with Culianu, because they deal with different types of magic. The three former ones deal with primitive or popular magic, and Culianu mainly with the spiritual magic in the context of the Renaissance. The main question is to what extent can Renaissance magic be equated with that of non-literate population, as were the examples chosen by Fraser and Lévy-Bruhl and others. My hypothesis is that Renaissance magic is not just simple merging the objects in a series governed by affinities or adversities, but through Pythagoras and Plato, it already has a scientific basis founded on mysticism of number, which governs and structures the whole of nature in all that is divine or human creation. Renaissance magicians were aware of this aspect, constantly seeking to identify the ciphers that would allow them to know the intelligible nature, natura naturans, like in Spinoza, and Natura Genitrix. And now, finally, I will pass to Culianu's book, Eros and Magic in the Renaissance. And the main merit of this book is that it brings forth the connection between Eros and magic, as it is clear from the very title of the book. And earlier works of Renaissance magic, Daniel Pickering Walker's Spiritual and Demonic Magic from Ficino to Campanella from 1958, and Francis Yates, Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition from 1964, did not give such importance to the links between Eros and magic. Both came from the Warburg School, whose members chose Renaissance art and thought as their main field of research. Unlike Walker and Yates, Culianu worked with a very broad sense of errors and a very narrow one of magic, a fact that allowed him to draw many lines of connection between the two planes. And I quote from Culianu's book, the 0 degree of magic is represented by Eros, which gives rise to the construction of an erotic magic, the form of intersubjective magic, operating by virtue of the law of the pneumatic interaction between individuals. He used the old pneumatic theory of love, which was most clearly expressed by Marsilio Ficino. And another observation is that Culianu was referring to a different type of erotic magic than the one that appears in authors like Julius Evola, Metafisica del Sesso from 1958, and Mircea Eliade, Mephistofele e l'Androgyne from 1962, and another study of Eliade, Spirit, Light, and Seed. Culianu applied the Aristotelian theory of knowledge based of pneumo-phantasmological principles, mainly from the treatise De Anima and Parva Naturalia. And from this point of view, his theory was that the Aristotelian theory of knowledge was the basis of the occult disciplines of the Renaissance. And I quote from Culianu's book, the art of memory and magic claimed to be able to order and control the process of reception and production of phantasms. And the main merit of his book is that his contribution to the theory of magic is due to the immense effort to reconstruct the mental framework that made possible the rise of magical disciplines in the Renaissance. And going through an immense bibliography, he did not limit himself to scholarly works on Renaissance culture, but also used the works of authors modern authors such as Freud, Jung, and Lacan, to better explain how Ficino and Bruno describe the meaning and the functionality of magic in the Renaissance. And finally, I want to say that Culianu's hermeneutic method is like an ars combinatoria, because he blends theories and concepts for 3 millennia, maybe, and from all over the cultures. And I think it is very difficult to write such a book. And I think that if he lived beyond his assassination, he could be an encyclopedic personality, maybe a follower of Mircea Eliade. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll never know. We can have conjectures about whatever would have followed. But I think he was going in a direction away from erudition, away from historicity, and this is what I gather from his last really publications and especially projects.
It's your magic.
Yes. So when he is looking into the future, into his own future, we have projects from the very last months of his life. They include gigantic collective projects for which he had managed to get positive answers from, yes, but not only publishers, that's one thing. Complete, in terms of delivery and everything was clear, but also the contribution of absolutely stellar figures of all the field. So for anyone who thinks that he was now a loner, going his way and out of his way, and finally out of his world, this world, to do, because this was one of the claims against Culianu, that he was moving astray, going astray, basically, towards the end of his life. He was, as yesterday Pablo Moretti indicated about the memory of whatever Culianu was at the University of Chicago. I mean, keeping in mind the fact that he was, socializing with his graduate students and then talking to them, becoming maybe too familiar with them, which is against university ethics. But also he was going astray quite technically in the sense of going to do, prediction of their futures, necromancy, or whatever you want to see. That is, that he was going into a world in which drugs, delirious predictions of individual and collective futures were becoming the norm. Were becoming that thing that he was interested in, which of course is not true if we see that. If we have a look simply at the kind of the summaries of his projected collective volumes, there is nothing dubious or non-scholarly or once again delirious about these projects. They are very serious, encyclopedic, comprehensive treatments of topics, including magic. And yes, he had to struggle still in the 1980s with the difficulty of putting together disciplines that have dealt with magic from the very, shall I say, primitive perspective that was the primitive mind that was behind it. So that was something which is, of course, connected to this self-image of the Europeans as the purveyors of progress and of rationality to all these savage people all over the place. So this is part of the hubris of the West, in which non-Western cultures have been read up until the time of Fraser and so forth. These people are collecting, let's say, still curiosities, odds and pieces, odd elements from alien cultures out there in the deserts and in the jungles. And they were putting them together under the label, the primitive mind. And as his mentor Eliade had done before, by showing discontinuity, and that is important, between those ideas and whatever was following. And the radical difference between that kind of primitive mind in primitive cultures and the classical traditions of humankind that are written, that have been discussed for millennia. There is a written culture in many areas of the world which have been dealing with these issues very far from the capacity of the primitive mind as understood by Fraser, that is going into very serious philosophical, logical, epistemological, comparative fields. And this is what he had to, to more or less move against that trend, which was still looming in the memory of the disciplines dealing with magic. We have to say, of course, cultural anthropology, let's say post Levi-Straussian cultural anthropology was dealing with that at least in a self-ironic mode, like him with the La Pensée Sauvage. La Pensée Sauvage, of course, in French, is also a pun upon words because he's talking about a plant, a flower, indeed, which is La Pensée Sauvage, not just the primitive. So, in Levi-Strauss, you have a kind of ironic and self-ironic counterpoint within anthropology to the classics of anthropology who have dealt with the so-called primitive mind, right? So fortunately, writing after that, and also writing after the deconstructivist turn in all human sciences, including anthropology, Culianu was free to return to, let's say, high cultural European magic as encapsulated by the paradigm of Renaissance, by the appearance of the Christian Kabbalah, Neoplatonism, all these things that had been treated before, but somehow in connection with that, cliche that the older things had happened, the more primitive, which is, of course, idiot. So, yes, he was moving in the direction of a new vision of magic, for which he simply needed the professional expertise of the best working on magic. And this was, I'm not sure he was going to explore that field any further, really, for a long time, but with the project of this encyclopedic vision of magic completed, as he thought it would be, then he could return at the most, let's say, arcane, secret, difficult problems in the history of high culture, including the projects around the journal Incognita. And we have to simply imagine this Uchronia, this possible alternative. Well, I think we have come to the end of this session. We were starting late, we finished late, but we'll recover after all these delays and meet promptly after the break at 2:30. So please take a break, come back at 2:30, and you on the net do the same. Thank you very much.